The year 1776 was a particularly important one for this nation. It was the year in which the Continental Congress declared its independence from Britain. That declaration had a profound effect on General Jonathan Moulton of New Hampshire. He was both a military man and an American patriot. When word reached him of the Continental Congress's action, nothing in the world could have kept him from joining the war he knew was coming. But the year had been one of great personal upheaval as well. Early in that year, Abigail, his wife of 21 years, had died. A bare 2 months later, he married Sarah, a much younger and quite beautiful woman. She was the widow of a man who had died in the fighting at Concord. The day after the wedding, the general planned to ride off and join with his men who had been gathering at Portsmouth. The general had moved his new wife into the house he had originally built for Abigail when they were first married. Sarah did not feel comfortable moving into the house so soon after Abigail's death, but the general assured her that his first wife had been a kind-hearted and generous woman, who would certainly not have minded. General Moulton was either shading the truth, or he never knew his first wife very well, even after 21 years of marriage. He also presented his wife with several pieces of fine jewelry. These had once belonged to Abigail's mother. Abigail had wanted to give them to her daughter, but since she had had none, the general assured Sarah, "I'm sure she would have wanted you to wear them." Once again, he miscalculated. Sarah reached into the drawer that contained the jewels and picked out a silver charm with a small pearl at the end. Her husband helped to fasten it around her neck. "Promise me that you will wear it every day until I return home," he said. Hesitantly, Sarah agreed, though she was still not easy in her mind about appropriating a dead woman's jewelry. Still, it was a lovely piece, and her husband had assured her it would be proper. A fierce rainstorm broke early the next day, but this did not delay the departure of General Jonathan Moulton. He knew that historic events were about to occur, and he would not let weather interfere with his plans. He wrapped himself in his cloak and rode off into the storm. Sarah stood at the door and watched him disappear into the gloom. Even after he could no longer be seen, she stared off in the direction in which he had ridden. Sarah was anxious, yet proud. After a few moments, she reluctantly shut the door and turned toward the stairs. Almost unconsciously, she reached up toward the necklace and rubbed it with her hand. The silver chain seemed to have suddenly become tight. She stopped rubbing and ran her finger around it. She could feel nothing different about the chain. Yet when she released it, the chain seemed to tighten once again. Sarah went over to the mirror that was hung at the head of the stairs. There seemed to be a slight redness around her throat, but the chain hung loosely as it should. She thought for a sec that there was a vague shape at her side, but it disappeared almost the instant she noticed it, and she decided it was simply smoke from her candle. While she was examining her neck, Sarah heard what sounded like a scratching noise coming from the bedroom. As she investigated, she found the source of the noise was a drawer in the bedroom dresser. It was, she recalled, the same drawer in which Abigail's jewelry was kept. Sarah feared that a rat had somehow become trapped in the drawer, so when she opened it, she was very cautious. She expected to have a rat jump out at her, but what did jump out was far more frightening. All of Abigail's rings came flying out and settled on the floor near the bedroom door. Frantically, Sarah searched the drawer to see if she could find some reason for this startling occurrence. She found nothing out of the ordinary, but the silver chain around her neck tightened up once again, this time more firmly than before. She felt as if she were being choked. The pressure on her neck caused Sarah to fall away from the dresser as though she had been jerked backward by the chain around her neck. Then she heard a faint yet distinct voice from behind her. It said, "My jewels!" Sarah looked around but could see no one. Then she heard the sound of rattling coming from the drawer, which flew open, and the rest of Abigail's jewelry jumped out and joined the rings on the floor. "My jewels!" came the voice again. Once again, the chain tightened around Sarah's neck. This time she was unable to loosen it, and it actually cut into her flesh. It also cut off her air, and she fell to the floor, gasping for breath and nearly unconscious. As she looked up, she saw a hazy figure, or what seemed to be a figure, hovering above her. It was the same sort of smoky form she had first glimpsed in the mirror, and now it had a more definitive shape, the shape of a woman, but a woman without a face. "My jewels!" said the figure, and an arm seemed to reach out from the form towards Sarah's throat. Then there was a sudden bang at the front door, and the sound of heavy boots came running up the stairs. General Jonathan Moulton stood in the bedroom door. "Sarah!" he cried. She was obviously choking, and the general ripped the chain from her neck and carried her to the bed. "I came back as quickly as I could," he said. "I was just passing by the cemetery and I saw her. Abigail. She was walking down the road heading for the house. I lost sight of her in the mist. I don't know how she got here so quickly or what she wanted. She wanted her jewels back," gasped Sarah. The smoky figure had disappeared, but so had all the jewelry that had been scattered about on the floor, including the silver chain with the pearl that Sarah had been wearing. The general stayed with Sarah for a few hours, and then took her to her parents' house, for she could obviously not stay in this old house any longer. On the way, the couple passed the cemetery. The general passed over at Abigail's grave. Several pieces of jewelry were visible, half buried in the rain-soaked earth. After seeing to Sarah's safety, he returned to the cemetery. By this time, the jewelry had all disappeared, apparently pulled down into the grave. No one ever had the courage to dig up Abigail's grave to see if she had finally been able to take it with her. After the war, General Moulton and Sarah never returned to the old house, and there is no record that Abigail did either. She apparently got what she wanted. General Jonathan Moulton outlived his second wife and became extremely wealthy. The older and richer he got, the less popular he became with his neighbors. He picked up a reputation for being greedy and miserly. Perhaps he and Abigail had been well suited for one another after all. According to another New Hampshire legend, General Moulton had made a pact with the devil. In return for his soul, the devil was to fill his boots with gold. But the legend continues. Moulton tried to outsmart the fiend by cutting the soles out of his boots. The devil kept pouring in the gold, but could never fill the boots, because the gold poured right out the bottom. Finally, when gold covered the entire floor, the fiend realized that he had been tricked, and the devil was not one to be trifled with. That very evening, Moulton's house burned down, and the old man became nearly frantic, searching through the ashes for his gold. It had all disappeared. When General Moulton finally died, all manner of strange rumors circulated, including one that his coffin was filled with gold. This time, the townsfolk did not hesitate. They dug up the grave, but were both disappointed and shocked. There was no gold, and no Moulton either. The coffin was empty.